So the Resident Evil franchise, oh wait, hold on, what I meant to say was, the
Resident Evil
franchise is easily one of the most iconic zombies franchises of all time. It exploded in popularity in the late 90s with its intense gameplay and iconic yet slightly cheesy dialogue.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
And ever since, the series has evolved alongside the gaming landscape, creating some of the best video games that personally I've ever experienced. However, despite how great these games are, when it comes to bringing that same success and brilliance into the movies, well,
looks like there's been a change of plans.
Now everyone's obviously entitled to their own opinion about what they like, but I think generally speaking these movies are received as straight arse. So when I hear that we're about to be treated to yet another live action adaptation of the Resident Evil series, it's fair to say I'm a bit concerned. Now it's looking as if this reboot is going to be picked up by Sony Pictures, which I would be excited about as that's different to Screen Gems who produced the other movies. However, Sony Pictures actually owns Screen Gems, so it's going to be all the same people who worked on it previously, and they'll likely just be involved again. So you know, great job there. Fair to say that factor is where a lot of the concern does come in, especially for me, because the original series of movies that we got from Paul W.S. Anderson were all over the place. Now I'll be honest, I actually watched these series of movies before ever touching any of the games, so I definitely think I like them more than, say, other Resident Evil fans. To be honest, they are a little bit of a guilty pleasure, like I do actually quite like some of them, especially the first one. To me, this is easily the best movie in the series. It is without doubt the most grounded as well, because they do get a little bit batshit crazy further down the line. It was just a pretty solid story. It introduced Umbrella and all the shady stuff really well. There were some really cool action sequences as well. Don't get me wrong, it was a little bit cheesy and it's not like an award-winning movie, but overall as a zombies movie, I thought it was just pretty solid. Of course, it had none of the original characters in it at all, which obviously pissed off a lot of fans, but to me, I didn't know, so I didn't really care at the time. I will say that it was really eye-opening playing the Resident Evil games and realising that the character of Alice just doesn't exist. There's not like this superhero running around the universe. Clearly Paul W.S. Anderson went a little bit rogue on that one. But after that really solid debut, we were treated to Resident Evil Apocalypse. Now this one is definitely the closest movie to the games, sort of covering around the time period of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3. You've also got Nemesis thrown in there, which is really cool, and he genuinely looks pretty good visually, and you've got fan favourites like Jill Valentine, Carlos Oliveira, all actually making appearances. However, the main issue with this movie is the fact that Alice goes from being a really sort of solid fighter to practically a superhero in about 5 minutes. She literally starts doing backflips off motorbikes and like blowing up liquors, which took like ages to kill in the first movie, and just absolutely smokes 3 in about 30 seconds. Also, by the end of the movie, she actually did have physical superpowers, like she could literally make people's like brains explode through a camera. It was very weird. I don't want this video to just become talking smack about the old Resident Evil movies, but I do think it's really important to cover where these went wrong to sort of justify why there's such a negative feeling about another live action remake. The third installment we were treated to was Resident Evil Extinction. Now to me this was a massive step down from the previous 2 movies, and the bar wasn't exactly set very high off those. And I think this is largely down to the significant ramp up and scale of the outbreak. You went from it being contained within Racoon City to essentially destroying half the world, and you're basically just watching a rip-off Mad Max. Like the entire world has just died off screen, and now you're just in this post-apocalyptic landscape all of a sudden. You've also lost half the characters from the previous movie, like Jill Valentine's nowhere to be seen, the little kid that you save, nowhere to be seen, and they're just replaced by other video game characters. So you then have Claire Redfield sat in there, who realistically doesn't really do a lot, but you know, video game characters back in it. We're also introduced to the idea of clones in this movie, where there's about 500,000 Alices that have been tested on to try and recreate the original essentially, which is just a massive theme that will then just continue with the rest of these movies. I don't know, this movie definitely has some really cool action sequences, and sort of the resolution of Carlos's arc in these movies is pretty cool, how he sort of sacrifices himself, but to me it felt like a significant drop off from the previous 2. Then we get Resident Evil Afterlife, and to me this is where shit got really weird. So Alice and her
Clone Army
start taking out all of the Umbrella strongholds, and they end up going to Tokyo to do so. And all of these Alice clones have a bunch of abilities, really overpowered, and then they all get wiped out by a bomb in the first 10 minutes of the movie. So everything they set up in the previous movie completely gone in this movie. That's a bit of a running theme with these. Anyway, in a search for a place called Arcadia, Alice ends up landing on top of a prison rooftop where she meets a load of survivors. Shit goes wrong. There's some of the most over-the-top action sequences and slow-mo edits that I've ever seen. It's completely batshit crazy. You've got Claire and Chris Redfield in this one, so you've got another video game character thrown into the mix. And you've got the big executioner enemy from Resident Evil 5 thrown in there as well, who's pretty cool. But some of the acting in this one, holy shit, it is like meme-worthy. The guy who plays Wesker, I'm not sure who he is, my god, he is the most over-the-top actor you've ever seen. Like, there's a bit where he literally just goes, "You should have bought more," and then throws his glasses and does the most over-the-top action fight sequence. It's crazy, this movie.
You should have brought more.
Again, part of it is so bad that it's good, like, I enjoy it and I can watch it and switch my brain off and have a good time with it, but as an actual movie, it's really shit. We were then treated to Resident Evil Retribution, and I think even as a kid I started to realise that these films are just really bad at this point. It starts out completely disregarding the previous movie, which seems to be a bit of a common theme with these movies, and we end up in a big underwater facility where Alice is being held hostage. Now this one to me feels a little bit like the Avengers Endgame of the Resident Evil Paul W.S. Anderson universe, because you literally just have every single fucking character thrown in. You have all of the ones coming back from the previous movies, like Rain, you have Carlos, you have is it One? I don't know, the guy who played Dr. Moon in that episode of Doctor Who.
The real world is a lie, and your nightmares are real.
And then you've got a bunch of video game characters as well, so you've got Jill Valentine who comes back. Claire and Chris disappear, but that doesn't matter because it never does in these movies. You get Leon come in, Barry Burton's in, Ada Wong is in there. It's just a complete clusterfuck of just every single relevant character across these movies. And the result of it is just completely terrible. Like, they literally rip off movie scenes from other franchises. Like, they literally copy Aliens towards the back half of this movie. I remember thinking when I watched this that there is no way that they could make the next one as bad as this. And lo and behold, I was wrong, because Resident Evil The Final Chapter is one of the worst movie experiences I think I've ever had. Not only is the story completely shit and full of all the cloning stuff again, but it literally betrays the entire lore of these own movies, with Alice being like the daughter of one of the founders, but this wasn't a founder that was in the earlier movies, they've just sort of roped him in all of a sudden. And now our main character Alice is a clone. It's really fucking weird. Again, it completely disregards the ending of the last movie where they were going to fight against the Red Queen at the end. It was just all a lie, it was all a bunch of bullshit and got retconned. But not only was the story of this one absolutely terrible and just betrayed everything about the old movies, but visually, this is one of the choppiest movies I think I have ever seen. I've never seen so many cuts in action sequences. Like, it is genuinely headache-inducing. Kind of like Afterlife, there's a bunch of characters that you just don't give a shit about that all die. Claire's somehow back in it again. Don't know where she was for the 5th movie, but she's just back now. And in the end, we end up wiping out the entire zombie infection just by dropping a bit of glass on the floor. Like, it's a bit ridiculous. Now, I'm not exactly a scientist, I don't understand how atmospheres work, but I'm fairly sure that when you break something that has gas in it, it doesn't then span across thousands of miles in a matter of seconds. Also, Albert Wesker, after surviving a nuclear explosion, got killed by a fucking door in this movie, so I think it kind of sums it up. Overall, this series just went out with a complete and utter whimper, and any potential silver linings taken from the earlier movies were completely destroyed by this last film. Anyway, you're probably thinking after like a 6.5 minute rant about how crap the Paul W.S. Anderson movies were, that I think that the latest one, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, is actually pretty good.
But wait! There's more!
No, it's still absolutely shit. Now, what I will say about this movie is that it is easily the closest to the games, and it has got loads of OG characters in from RE1 and RE2. The only problem is, they're all cast horrendously. Like, nobody fits the description of the character they should be playing in these movies. Don't get me wrong, there's definite fan service there, there's lots of cool scenes and quotes sort of directly from the games. You've even got some cool like Lisa Trevor stuff, like the baddie from Resident Evil 1, which is really cool. However, some of the other choices, particularly regarding the characters, are just dog shit. Like, you've got Leon, who is basically treated as comic relief and is just horrendous. And holy shit, the CGI in this movie is rough. Honestly, it makes the ending of Sons of Anarchy look good. and that really takes some doing. It's honestly so bad that it does just completely take you out of the movie. However, it's definitely not as bad as some of the poorly W.S. Anderson ones that we got. But moving away from all of the previous failings, and as we've just gone through, there is clearly a lot of them, I still think there is room to potentially hold out a smidgen of hope and be excited about the future Resident Evil. I mean, from a movie standpoint, it physically can't get worse in my opinion. I feel like Resident Evil has such a rich lore in itself, like there's so many avenues that anyone could delve down. You haven't even got to necessarily replicate the mainline games. Don't get me wrong, I definitely think you should include elements of them and have the characters in there, because that is what brings so many fans in, is having those characters that you've grown to love and physically play as during the games. But I don't think you necessarily need a full retelling of the games, because realistically, that content is experienced over, 20 to 30 hours in some cases, whereas for a movie you've only got 2 hours to go through an entire video game. It's not realistic. I think another big element that the movies have lacked, other than maybe slightly Raccoon City, is the horror element of Resident Evil. Like, the games, at least to me, shit me up. A lot of them do. A lot of them are genuinely quite scary, but that's never been felt in the movies before, which is really surprising, because you feel like that'd be quite an easy element to pick up. And I'm not necessarily just saying throw a load of jump scares in there, but there's so much tension that you can build with the various creatures or zombies roaming around an area. And the inclusion of that horror element could be the case moving forward, with the director of the latest movie going to be Zach Krieger, who is best known for directing a horror movie called The Barbarian, which apparently was received very well. Can't say I've seen it personally, but it has got a lot of good reviews. The general rumours regarding the plot of this movie seem to be that it's going to centre around Resident Evil 0, which again is a great place to sort of reboot a franchise, go back to the very start of it. And supposedly it's looking like it's going to be very heavily linked to the actual games and adapt them faithfully, which would be a good start. Resident Evil 0 certainly isn't my favourite game in the series, but it's not exactly the worst either. Currently this movie is set to release in theatres on September the 18th, 2026, so in about 18 months from this, so no doubt we'll get more info and potential trailers and stuff in the future, which we'll definitely be covering on this channel. But more importantly than that, what do you guys think? Are you excited about the prospect of a new Resident Evil adaptation? I mean, we've definitely had some shit ones. I haven't even included the Netflix series in this video because it's not even worth mentioning, it's that shit. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and let me know if you want to see a very long video summarising my thoughts on all of these Resident Evil movies, because I'll be honest, making this has been a lot of fun. So if that's something that you want to see, let me know down below. Anyway, like and subscribe if you're new. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in another video sometime soon.